Once upon a time, nestled deep within the heart of an ancient and tranquil forest, there lived a bear named Baloo. His presence was as steady as the wind that gently caressed the leaves of the towering trees, and his thick, glossy fur shimmered in the dappled sunlight, much like the surface of a calm river glinting in the midday sun. However, despite his outward appearance of strength and serenity, Baloo carried within him an invisible burden, an ever-present storm of worry that clouded his thoughts. He was plagued by an unrelenting anxiety, a constant hum of unease that never seemed to quiet. Baloo was known throughout the forest not only for his size and gentle nature, but also for the endless concern he felt about everything and everyone. His worry was far from the simple caution that comes naturally to those living in the wild. It was more like a constant torrent of thoughts, swirling through his mind in a never-ending loop. Each day, instead of enjoying the forest's peaceful moments, he found himself trapped in an endless cycle of anxiety about what might happen next, creating scenarios in his head that were highly unlikely to ever unfold. Even the smallest of tasks seemed to loom over him like insurmountable challenges, and this fear of what might go wrong drained him of energy before he even began. What Baloo failed to realize, though, was that while he focused so intensely on protecting himself from potential dangers, it was actually his own anxiety that was causing the most harm. His sleepless nights became filled with restless tossing, as worries about food, safety, and the future swirled endlessly in his mind. His appetite fluctuated wildly, sometimes causing him to lose all interest in food, and other times leading him to overeat in a futile attempt to soothe his troubled thoughts. His anxiety left him on edge, making even the simplest of daily tasks feel like monumental endeavors. Despite his efforts to speed through tasks in hopes of finding peace of mind, this only led to more mistakes, reinforcing the old adage that haste makes waste. One winter, as the forest lay in deep slumber beneath a thick blanket of snow, Baloo faced his greatest challenge yet. For most bears, winter is a time of hibernation, a season of restful sleep that restores their strength. But for Baloo, what should have been a time of peace became a torturous struggle. His mind refused to rest, keeping him awake with endless worries about whether he had stored enough food to survive until spring. Instead of sinking into the deep, renewing sleep that his body so desperately needed, Baloo spent his nights pacing restlessly through his den, mentally reviewing all the things that could go wrong in the months ahead. When the first signs of spring finally appeared, with soft buds pushing through the snow and birds singing in the cool morning air, Baloo emerged from his den, feeling far from rejuvenated. His body, deprived of true rest, was weak and tired, and his once glossy fur had lost its shine, now dull and patchy. His eyes, which had once gleamed with life, were clouded with fatigue. Yet despite his physical exhaustion, his mind was already racing ahead to the next winter, consumed with thoughts of how to prepare more thoroughly this time around. As the warm months of summer arrived and the forest burst into full bloom, Baloo became obsessed with gathering as much food as possible. Day after day, he roamed the forest, picking fruit and nuts with a frantic urgency, driven by the fear that he would not have enough to last through the next winter. But in his haste, Baloo often gathered fruits that weren't yet ripe, or neglected to store them properly, resulting in a stockpile of rotting, unusable food. His once methodical nature gave way to chaos, and the other animals began to notice his increasingly erratic behavior. They watched with concern as he rushed from one tree to another, ignoring the natural rhythm of the forest, and instead allowing his anxiety to dictate his actions. The effects of Baloo's actions were soon felt by more than just him. His overzealous foraging depleted the forest's natural resources, leaving less food for the other creatures who relied on the same fruit and nuts to sustain themselves. While Baloo's anxiety told him that he was simply preparing for the worst, His actions were actually disrupting the delicate balance of life in the forest, impacting not only his own well-being, but also that of his fellow inhabitants. The animals that had once admired Baloo's strength and wisdom now began to view him with a mixture of pity and frustration. Even in his social interactions, Baloo's anxiety manifested in ways that further isolated him. His mind, always racing with thoughts of what could go wrong, caused him to speak hastily and interrupt others during conversations, often without realizing it. His friends, who had once enjoyed his company, found it difficult to connect with him as his nervous energy made it hard for him to truly listen or engage. Over time, Baloo noticed the growing distance between himself and those around him, but he felt powerless to change it, trapped in a cycle of worry and regret. As the days wore on, Baloo's exhaustion became more and more evident. His once strong and robust frame grew thinner, and the weight of his sleepless nights could be seen in the heavy bags under his eyes. He often found himself sitting by the forest's tranquil lake, staring at the calm waters, but unable to find peace in the beauty that surrounded him. While the other animals would sit by the water's edge, enjoying the stillness and reflecting on their day, Baloo's mind raced, consumed by worries about the future and the challenges that lay ahead. It was during one of these moments, as Baloo sat by the lake, overwhelmed by his thoughts, that a wise hummingbird appeared. The little bird, who had been observing Baloo from afar, fluttered down to perch beside him. "Dear Baloo," the hummingbird began, "I can see that your heart is heavy with worry. Let me share some of the wisdom I have gathered in my travels, which might help ease your mind." The hummingbird's first lesson was about the importance of living in the present moment. "The future is uncertain for all of us," the bird explained. "But worrying about it will not change what is to come. Focus on the here and now, and trust that the future will unfold as it should." This simple yet profound advice resonated with Baloo, who had spent so much time trapped in thoughts of what might go wrong that he had forgotten to appreciate the beauty of the moment. Next, the hummingbird spoke of acceptance. "There are things in life that we cannot control, no matter how hard we try. Fighting against them only brings more suffering. Learn to flow with the natural rhythm of life rather than against it," the hummingbird advised. Baloo, who had always tried to control every aspect of his life, began to realize that much of his anxiety came from his refusal to accept the things he couldn't change. The hummingbird's final piece of advice was about gratitude. "Even on the darkest of days, there is always something to be thankful for," the hummingbird said softly. "When you focus on those small blessings, the weight of your worries will begin to lift." Baloo, who had become so focused on his fears and anxieties, had forgotten to appreciate the many good things in his life, the kindness of his friends, the beauty of the forest, and the simple joy of being alive. As time passed, Baloo began to practice these lessons. Slowly but surely, he learned to quiet his racing mind and focus on the present moment. He found joy in the small things, a gentle breeze, the sound of leaves rustling in the trees, the warmth of the sun on his fur. His health improved, his relationships with the other animals grew stronger, and he began to see the beauty in the world around him once again. Moral of the story: Baloo's journey reminds us that while anxiety may be a constant companion in life, it doesn't have to control us. True wisdom comes from learning to live in the present, accepting what we cannot change, and finding gratitude even in difficult times. Just like Baloo, we can all learn to appreciate the beauty of the world around us, to breathe deeply in the face of uncertainty, and to trust that everything will unfold as it should. This tale encourages us to embrace each moment with mindfulness and courage, knowing that by doing so, we can overcome the internal barriers that hold us back. By cultivating patience, showing compassion to ourselves and others, and learning to let go of our need for control, we can find peace in even the most challenging of times. Just as Baloo did when he finally learned to sit quietly by the lake and appreciate the calm reflection of the trees on the water.